Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about My Hero Academia Season 5. I do not have the episode number. I think it's episode 25. I believe so. Let me just very quickly check. One moment. Yeah, episode 125. Excellent. Anyway, this episode, we went back to the kids and it was ultimately a very chill episode. In a way, like the exciting climax was last week, and this is more of a setup climax. And it's actually really interesting where we ended off, because some people were betting that we would be ending off here. I know some of the people I talked to, I feel like Sarge was one of the people, were feeling that this was probably going to be where we were going to end it off. That being the kids overlooking the the city line. Now, I gotta say, I do think the ending was kind of messy, and I mean specifically the spot after the ending song. And the reason for that is just, I think they kind of messed up the cliffhanger. I think they should have kept the cliffhanger from the manga, because that's a significantly more exciting cliffhanger. But now that we're at the end of the My Villain Academia fiasco, looking back at Villain Academia, I ultimately think, you know, narratively, I think it was fine in terms of the structure they went for, in terms of playing the how did we get here game. I think that part worked pretty okay. I'm pretty sure the majority of anime fans are going to be happy with it. But in terms of execution on the order of material, in terms of maintaining the amount of information that was here from the original story, I do think at the end of the day, Villain Academia was not a good adaptation. And I'm saying that with the same metrics that I compare light novel adaptations to. If you're sacrificing a good chunk of information that gives more clarity to a situation or fleshes out characters more, then by definition to me, you are not a good adaptation. And when it came to Villain Academia, it removes some information and slots it in other places, and then other spots are just completely gone. And it does a disservice to Hero Academia going forward into the future. And this one is really interesting because one of the main concepts that is brought up in Villain Academia is tied to Spinner. And that idea keeps popping up again and again in My Hero Academia proper, that being specifically mutant shape discrimination. And to be fair, the anime has always done this. The anime is the worst for setup and foreshadowing. Like, if you want to see good foreshadowing, you have to go and you have to look at the manga to get all the details. But the anime always seems to skip this particular part. And it's interesting because sometimes the anime probably makes a really good move skipping some stuff. One of my favorite examples, not famous because people don't know about it, because if they knew about it, right, we wouldn't be talking about it. But one of my favorite examples is back during the Shizaki arc, there was the character Nemto, and Nemto had a whole little background. I think it was 2 pages of a flashback that he had explaining who he was. And Nemto was the guy that forced people to tell the truth, right? And, you know, the anime never adapted it. And for him, looking at the manga right now, there has been no reason to actually have that little bit of backstory. It was very unnecessary. So in some spots, you know, the anime makes a pretty good bet, but Season 5 in general, I don't think is a good example of the anime making good bets on what information they removed. And because they restructured the arc, I do think there are a few spots where the execution isn't great. I won't talk about the visuals because the poor people, they were having their own trouble. But like, when it comes to delivering information, that's something that's the bare minimum you can have. They don't have to animate, as we've seen, giving information away. So that's my little quick blurb overall on Villain Academia. I think for the anime onlys, they probably won't really care. Because this is an issue, like, if you don't know that there's information missing, like, why would you care? And anime is usually really good at hiding the fact that there's missing information. The viewing experience, I would say between the manga and the anime, like, the manga's better in terms of just how much information you're getting. The anime has botched a lot of things. The manga has a level of Easter eggs that the anime just can't touch, and that is unfortunate. But again, anime onlys, they don't know what's missing, so they don't know what to miss, and that is perfectly okay. But that's my overall thoughts on the adaptation of Villain Academia in general. Had they kept a lot more of the information, I think I would have been happy. But what can you do? They were probably making really cutthroat decisions. Like, likely when it comes to the people who were putting together the adaptation, they were looking at what information they could afford to skip out on, to make their workload easier or something like that. It's just interesting what they chose. And unfortunately for them, Hero Academia is a very visual story. And in this case, the more visual something is, the more the anime has to draw. And that's the problem, because the anime doesn't want to have to draw too many things. Anyway, I always love talking about the adaptation. I always love pointing out where the weaknesses are. But we are here to talk about the episode as well, so let's get into the episode proper. So, overall, I think it's a positive episode. I think it was a nice little finish, aside from the things I said at the beginning. In terms of the notes that were being thrown around here, I think there's a few cool ones. And starting it off with Quirk Singularity, we have it that Garaki is the one that came up with Quirk Singularity. That's pretty cool. Now, I love the idea of Quirk Singularity. I love what it means with Izuku. Because of the definition that Garaki sets up for what Quirk Singularity is. I'm not sure if all the information is out, but I will just say the fundamental idea with Quirk Singularity, is that hardware can't evolve fast enough to keep up with the software, and in this case, the software is quirks. So this is actually really cool, and Garaki says it showed up in the 4th generation already. I don't really know what generation we're in when it comes to Izuku. I know we talk about this on the live streams all the time, and people keep telling me, but I'm going to assume that Izuku's either 4th or after. Point is, when it comes to Quirk Singularity, we've actually been seeing it since the beginning of the series, because of the fundamental definition is hardware can't evolve fast enough to keep up. So you're seeing a fundamental incompatibility between a body and a quirk. We have a very good example of who is suffering from Quirk Singularity right in front of us. Heck, even in this episode, it's Aoyama. Aoyama is one of the first victims that we've seen of Quirk Singularity. Now, mind you, I really think if you were to just take that definition and really think about it, technically, if we're talking about hardware incompatibility with quirks and not being able to handle a quirk, technically, then everyone who has a weakness when it comes to overuse of the quirk would fall under Quirk Singularity. And the idea that it's already been appearing since the 4th generation, what we're really looking at here is the degree to which Quirk Singularity affects someone. And this all really depends on how loosely you take the definition that Garaki has. But the fundamental idea, there are some drastic examples like Aoyama. The man's stomach collapses in when he's using his quirk. He needs a special device to use his quirk. There's no way around it. Aoyama is a victim of Quirk Singularity. When you need a device to help you do that, you have to be a victim of Quirk Singularity. Your hardware can't keep up with your poor little quirk. Now, if we talk about people who kind of got an easier run with Quirk Singularity, well, you could maybe argue Shoto, because he can kind of moderate his weaknesses. He's got to keep his body perfectly balanced. Mind you, he does that with the quirk itself. His body's not actually made to be able to handle that. If you look at someone like Endeavor, Endeavor can't use his quirk for long periods of time. I think you could argue that Quirk Singularity has affected Endeavor to some degree because his body can't keep up with the needs of the quirk, that is, being able to keep cool while using the quirk. Are there any people that actually have no side effects from Quirk Singularity? Probably the people that were there at the beginning of the onset of quirks. Like, this is probably talking to people like the 2nd user or the 3rd user. They probably have limited weaknesses. Let's see, who else? Maybe Koda? He might be the one guy that isn't affected by Quirk Singularity too much because his power is relatively simple, and at that point, he's only overusing his own voice. You can't really call that an issue of the body not keeping up. It really depends on how much you would apply the definition that Garaki gave us here. But the thing you have to keep in mind is that since it started appearing in the 4th generation, and since this is an old idea that he brought up early on, that means this thing has been going on for more than 50 years. And I do think that is a reasonable point given what we know in the manga about this. And mind you, that's not a spoiler, because even if you were to watch, actually the anime is very likely to cut out some of the critical details here, but even if you were to watch the anime episode that would eventually talk a little bit more about the definitions and the timeline, you'd still have to think about it a little bit to figure out the actual timeline. Oh, you know what? Toru. You might say like Toru with just base invisibility isn't really affected by Quirk Singularity. That's a pretty simple power. I would say that. You could also say that by definition, Ochako might not be super affected by it because she can train to make her body stronger to be able to handle like the nausea that comes with her quirk. Personally, I think this is one of the coolest concepts in Hero Academia. I love thinking about it. I love looking at the examples. So I really enjoyed getting a definition here in the anime. After that, speaking of Aoyama and Toru, the power sequence exposition, overall, I thought that was pretty neat. We talked about how this episode could have been good for the next start of the season, or sorry, for the beginning of season 6. We talked about how that would really work well. And, you know, I remember, because I think I was talking to Ty about it, but I remember saying, like, yeah, no, man, they're not going to use that as a recap, because that's not what the anime does. The anime is 100% going to waste an episode to reintroduce us to the characters. And I'm pretty sure that's still going to happen in season 6. So I'm happy to see that came true here, because that would have been the best recap you could have gotten. Here I also want to talk about Toru's quirk. In this one, the anime, of course, says that her quirk's invisibility, but you see that she can now refract light that is coming outside, like it's passing like between her hands, it's outside of her body. This girl's power, if you want to talk about quirk awakenings, Toru, right? Toru is 100% someone who went through sudden quirk expansion. All they gotta say is like, oh yeah, I was one day just chasing criminal, and all of a sudden I got to bend light. That is ultimately the same mechanic as quirk awakening. Yeah, nah, man. Toru's power set, like, it's not just invisibility. We need to update this. Come on, man. This girl's quirk is not invisibility. This is full-on light manipulation. We also got Mina's Acid Man, and we had that really cute Kirishima and Mina moment. Adorable. We had Kirishima talking about how one of the things that he improved on was improving demoralizing villains. And this is an unfortunate thing, and this speaks to a lot of issues. Well, not issues, but peculiarities. No. Bad word. Quirks. There's a lot of quirks here. Kirishima is someone whose power is pretty much a dead end. The author has shown us no way in which this power is not a dead end. So, ultimately, when it comes to Kirishima, when you look at him here, what did he actually learn? He just learned, like, brawling tactics. Unfortunately, Kirishima just doesn't work for the meta of Hero Academia. And mind you, the author is aware of it, because he reminds us that he's aware of it. But in Kirishima's case, it's unfortunate because for Kirishima, he's not going to be like, the villains that matter are not villains that can be demoralized. For example, he fought robots. Robots are not going to be demoralized. Mind you, he's hard enough to break them, so that's good. But then, you know, moving further, Nomu are not going to be demoralized because they're mindless killing machines. So this is the ultimate problem with Kirishima here, and the problem with a lot of quirks is that the author just did not give himself a lot of ways out, and he did not give himself a lot of ways to make cool powers. So as we go into the future, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of upgrades people are getting and how they're making those upgrades work. Unfortunately, you know, this is, you could say, the negatives of having a very simple power at the beginning. Even though it does work really well for the superhero genre, Shonen Jump and its need for escalation is what makes this a very interesting mix. Now, you know, if you were to ask me, like, how would I improve Kirishima's power? I don't know. I legitimately don't know. Without saying that he can harden things outside of his body, I'm not sure. When it comes to someone like Kirishima, you would have to be going into what Horikoshi ultimately did, which is weak but skilled. Because again, when you see him talking about making his opponents lose the will to fight, that's a skill. And in that case, there is something you could do to make Kirishima a little bit more viable in more situations. If you had Kirishima learn how to use weapons a little bit better, or if you had him learn how to throw projectiles, the thing that you could do is have Kirishima rip out his hair and then flick that hair around like it was a shuriken. Now, mind you, I don't know what the rules would be on that power when the hair is disconnected from Kirishima's body, but given that the hair itself hardens as well, at least, sure, it does look like it hardens. Assuming it hardens, that would be like the one thing you could do to maybe make it a little bit more interesting. Otherwise, you just have to be playing with the hardness that Kirishima can hit and maybe eventually make him unbreakable, like, actually. Unfortunately, Kirishima has a dead-end power that is kind of hard to work with. But, again, works in superhero genre, doesn't work with escalation needs. He might want to consider incorporating some of those stamps that Night Eye had. Moving on, we have Uraka. Why do I have Uraka bonus? Ah, well, whatever. We had Uraka. You saw her using her whip. We saw it later on that she had adapted Izuku's black whip. Now, she says she can't use it as well as Sero, but I do want to just point out that she was able to wrap it really well around this robot. So there is some degree of control and manipulation here, as much as she wants to say that there isn't. So let's keep that in mind. She's a lot more useful than she made it sound. Yeah, it was a cool shot overall for Uraraka. We then have the really nice Izuku Uraraka moment. Really appreciated it. I thought it was really cute. I think they removed Mineta getting jealous about it, which, you know, whatever. It's the anime. They remove stuff. But it was still a really cute moment, and I like the idea that they improve each other. Really good. After that, we have the Izawa and Eddie moment. Now, this moment works better with the All Might moment. Now, unfortunately, I do think... actually, no. I think it's all good. I think it's all good. I have to look at the manga again, but I think it's all good. I do like what was happening in the Eddie moment, right? Ultimately, we find out that they're going to be training Eddie. All Might's going to be helping out with that. We saw that her horn was acting up. That means it's getting close to going off again. Izawa went over there to cancel it out. It's all good. Good stuff. We got to see Eddie's room. It's really adorable. We have, I think, one of my personal favorite lines in Hero Academia when it comes to predicting the future, and that's specifically when Izawa tells Eddie that she's at UA. So when I saw this line, and then the All Might moment kind of makes it a little bit worse, or sorry, not worse, stronger. When Izawa is setting up that this is UA, he is setting up that UA is a safe place. And ultimately in this series, when that line is set up, what I'm thinking is that line has to be challenged. And ironically enough, you know, Izawa recently in the manga had a line, and it wasn't any kind of special line. It was just him making a declaration about something. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense that it's Izawa saying this, because Izawa is the one person responsible for setting up the idea that this is a place that is safe, and then also setting up the idea that this could be challenged. He's the one that brought in the rhetoric that made me think like, yo, UA is going to be attacked. The day that I saw that in the manga, I was thinking UA is going to be attacked, because what Izawa does here is essentially he builds UA up as a symbol. Now, I do believe that the All Might moment made me feel even more certain about that, but I don't see the line here in the anime, so I don't really know if I'm misremembering something from the manga, but I think this was the quirk for this particular scene. Point is, this line is one that made me think, yo, UA is going to be attacked at some point in the future, just because of the build-up that he went in here with. And mind you, that's just me telling you how my mind works on these kind of things. After that, we have the sequence with the one for all users, and we're finding out about them. I think I'll make a video for the anime only is about just explaining the users. But we have a lot of really interesting rhetoric that comes out here, especially, well, pretty much what All Might's saying. You know, like All Might comes in, they're saying that they weren't chosen ones, and you kind of understand what All Might is saying. Like, they came about because there was no other choice but to pass it on, because you could see Banjo. Banjo looked like he was about to die. So you understand what he's saying. They were people that earned the right, but they weren't chosen ones. Now, the thing is, All Might also says that he doesn't know about the second and third users. So you have to keep in mind that when All Might says that, he doesn't know for sure what he is saying. And let me tell you, All Might has a history of being an unreliable narrator. When All Might says things, you really shouldn't believe them. And in terms of and especially with One for All, because All Might's the first guy that said that the Vestiges couldn't really do anything, because ultimately All Might didn't know the extent of what actually was going on with the Vestiges. So you have to keep that in mind. All Might is saying that, but you know he doesn't know what's going on. Now you have to understand though, from the perspective of the narrative, what the author wanted to really show in that sequence really becomes apparent when you see the image of Banjo fighting in the environment, and you have the buildup of oh my god, this society that All for One ruled, it was pretty horrible, where All for One was targeting the strongest people and taking them down. What he really wanted to show in this moment is just, yo guys, this is a really sketchy time period. Things were a lot more desperate in that time. So when it comes to this, it's less about the fact that these guys weren't chosen ones, and it's more about the fact that there wasn't an opportunity to make chosen ones or to pick chosen ones, that kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind. We'll have to see whether or not this rhetoric is overturned in the future, but at the end of the day, All Might is not the authority on this. After that, we have the slice of life cooking sequence, and I just liked Bakugo cooking and pointing out Fuyumi would be very upset with Shoto with the way he treated the ingredients. I just thought that was really hilarious. After that, we move into Izuku's reflection. So the reflection itself is interesting in that it was a cool place to get it. And when you see what the kids are ultimately going to be doing at the end of the season, you know, they're moving now into that big operation. The reflection makes sense because this is kind of like saying like, okay, yeah, I really enjoyed my time here. And you know, you are going into like technically a new year, a new semester. Also worth pointing out that we do have some aggressive time skips where we go from the beginning of a new semester that everyone is celebrating to, oh hey, it's time to move into the next year, because they're talking about undergrads. So this is where the manga really picked up the pace, and it does make for a kind of hasty, it adds to a hasty feel. But Izuku's reflection makes more sense in the context of what comes after this season. Then we have Izawa and All Might's talk. This is another really great scene that is really relevant right now in the current manga events. Yeah, man, this is a great scene. In general, pointing out that All Might is a workaholic is good, and then even going, well, this might be the anime only thing because I don't remember this wording in the manga, but pointing out that All Might's addicted to work. Yeah, he is addicted to work. Yeah, that is a very negative connotation. Yeah, no, All Might shouldn't be trusted when it comes to these matters. And again, Izawa comes in here and he's giving a much more peaceful option to All Might, which I personally really appreciate. I think this is a really good moment, and this is definitely a moment that you should keep in mind as you go into the future of Hero Academia, because this calls out All Might's problems. Then after that, we go into the final sequence of setting up like the villains. You know, Hawks is talking about the keyword is hospital, and I'm thinking like, yo, I would have thought that the hospitals were suspect when you have people stealing bodies, but yeah, you know, whatever. But yeah, hospital is a keyword. We'll have to see what they ultimately do with that. And then we go into the ending itself. And like I said, I found that the ending was a little bit messy just with the way that they structured it, and they didn't leave off on the best line I think they could have picked, which was really unfortunate. But overall, the episode of Hero Academia, it has a lot of great points. This is definitely not an episode that you can afford to miss when it comes to actually looking at the characters in the future, because the episode has a lot of character rhetorics. And if you're a shipper, you know, there's a lot of nice little moments. You had an Ojiro Hagakure moment, like kind of in there as well. You have the Izuku Ochako stuff. You have Kirishima and Mina. Right, for a shipper, you probably want to be here for this episode. But in terms of the biggest thing that this episode contributes, aside from setup, it's really the character rhetorics. You want to be looking at these rhetorics, and you, especially for All Might, you want to be looking at everything that All Might says and everything that people say about All Might, because this is what justifies All Might's behaviors in general. You also had Night Eye being invoked here, and this is in general something that the author does, because he has to keep pointing out All Might's problems and the consequences for some of All Might's problems. In this case, right now, Night Eye is one of the greatest consequences that All Might's ever had. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.